So we all know Lego is expensive, but not all colours are created equally. For example, the typical colour that's used to create Geonosis, dark orange, is a super expensive piece, or at least used to be. It is becoming a bit more readily available now, but nevertheless I thought it would be a perfect colour to include in this mock building challenge, where I take a planet and try and recreate it in $30 and $300. So for this first and smaller Geonosis mock, I'm also going to give myself a time limit of only 20 minutes, and then for the big mock I'm going to give myself 2 days to work on that. Fingers crossed I'm going to have enough dark orange to complete the 2 mocks, otherwise I'm going to have to spend a lot of money. You can see I've laid out a few bins worth of dark orange already on the table, and I'm also going to be using medium nougat as most people do in their Geonosis mocks. I've also ordered a few extra pieces to help us along the way. Now before we get started on this first smaller mock, I want to quickly go over what we're going to be including in this mock. We're going to be basing this off of the second Battle of Geonosis from Star Wars The Clone Wars, and so of course we're going to be recreating those catacombs where they go through with the flamethrowers. So now I'm heading into the build with a small idea of what I'm going to be building. I basically laid out a black border around the edge of the mock with a couple of black plates and some black bricks, and I wanted to create a nice sloping effect from front to back as you go back across the mock, with the back section being the highest point of the mock. I want to create a nice mix of tiles and plates to give it a nice rough sandy effect, and I'm using a mixture of slopes as well as wedge plates to get this nice sloping effect. And then of course, classic to Geonosis, I built up 3 small spires at the back which kind of also act as the pillars that would hold up the roof of those caves. And then as some finishing touches, I added some small rock pieces onto the top of each of the pillars. I think this finishes them off really nicely. I'm saving a few for the bigger mock, but for the middle one I tiled it off with a nice tile. Now turning our attention back to the border of the mock, this is looking a little bit unfinished. I'm going to go around with the black tiles. I'm quite low on these black 1x tiles, so I'm going to go ahead and spruce in some patches of sand as if it's sort of fallen onto the border. This is a good way to cheat the system and not have to buy any more black plates, because I know I'm going to be doing a load more orders for this next mock. Now that's looking pretty great, but there's one thing we need to add, and that is minifigures. So I'm going to begin with, of course, Ki-Adi-Mundi in the back. He led the attack that went through the caves.
We must push on!
And of course he was followed by a load of the flame troopers, so I'm adding this guy in here. As for Geonosians, I didn't have any of their guns, so I decided to try and build up my own custom gun for them. This one here uses a nice trans clear and lime coloured piece of science equipment, which I think looks really good for that energy effect of the blasters that the Geonosians use. And for the second one I wanted to build a bit of a longer blaster, and then I added one of those small cups on the end to add the energy effect again. I absolutely love the sound of the Geonosian blasters, and I think these recreate them pretty well. I added the one without wings on the base here, and I added the other one over on the far side facing off against the flame trooper. I thought this was a little bit empty, so I added a couple of clone troopers spruced across the mock, one dead at the front and then one in the back reinforcing Ki-Adi-Mundi. Overall I think with the constraints this mock turned out really well. Obviously I had the time pressure for this mock, but I also had a very small budget to spend on this mock as I'm saving most of the pieces for the bigger one, and I think this turned out really nicely. I still managed to get in some nice clean techniques in here, and I really do think the terrain of Geonosis is one that's really fun to build. So speaking of which, let's head over to the main build and start to plan out the bigger mock. So we're going to be going with 2 big grey base plates for this, as I really want to include one of the brand new ATTEs that was sent to me by the awesome guys over at Zavvi. If you haven't already gone and checked out Zavvi, make sure to do so in the link down below. It'll be the top link in the description. They're a fantastic Lego retailer which has honestly some of the best deals across all different Lego retailers. They ship worldwide, and if they don't have any deals running on the set that you want, you can also get yourself a discount with the code that you see on screen. So thanks to Zavvi for sending me this set, but now we've got it built, let's continue planning this next mock. I'm going to go ahead and draw the layout that I want to have around the ATTE on this base plate right here. These are both new sealed in the packet, and I'm really hoping the pen doesn't bleed through. But we've laid out a few different areas across the base plate, and this will really help me to figure out what's going where. The lines basically indicate any changes in terrain height, and the circles are basically the big spires that we see on Geonosis. I've got a few cool techniques lined up to finish those off. The clones as well as the ATTE will be coming from this right hand side, and from the left we will have a nice droid army coming from this side. And of course, unlike the first mock, this will be based on the first Battle of Geonosis from episode 2. But before we get going on the mock, I have another package full of pieces from Bricklink to help us get started on the big Geonosis. We have a load of pieces in black, which are actually going to be really useful for a nice black border, and you can see we also got loads of medium nougat and dark orange to build the Geonosis terrain. Okay, so now a couple of hours have already passed in the planning phase, so it's time we get building, and I began by trialing my border technique with these corner pieces just to get the right height and make sure everything was going to be at the right position. And then I began to work on adding some bricks and plates and raising everything up to the correct heights. Once I'd done this, I built up the black border around half of this mock. I then separated the 2 base plates and started to work on the first section, which would house the ATTE. For this, I then started to build up a raised section all the way around the outside of the mock, using more dark orange and medium nougat slopes to create a nice bowl effect around the outside as if the ATTEs just stepped into this flat section. I then worked on the lower section in the middle, adding in sections of medium nougat in there as different patches of lighter sand. I will go back in and add some more details to this section, but I didn't want it to be the craziest amount of detail here, as it will be all covered up by the ATTE. Laying down more tiles and plates, the terrain began to sprawl across the entirety of this first base plate. I wanted to add a nice mixture between the tiled effect as well as the actual studs. In further sections I'll definitely do less studs being exposed and more tiles, but as I said, this area is going to be less detailed because of the ATTE. I then turned my attention to this raised section in the corner, adding a small sort of built up spire kind of thing. To do this, I incorporated some interesting techniques with the wedge pieces on their sides to make some smooth and natural rock features, and adding more plates and tiles up onto this top section, continuing the raised sloping effect as I go up the mock. From this overhead view you can now see me branching onto the second base plate. I'm just continually adding down layers of tile and plate until my fingers were literally so painful and the time was so late in the day that I had to stop for the night. Whew. Day 2, let's get building. I began right where I left off yesterday, increasing the length of the border and working on this section that's jutting out onto the second base plate. I continued laying down some tiles, finishing off this section. I think I managed to include some nice undulations in the terrain, using a lot of those nice curved 1x1 dark orange pieces to add some nice different smooth transitions from each layer. And then on both sides I completely finished off the black border, just using these 1x2x6 pieces going all the way along the sides. And then it was back to terrain work, and I continued with this sort of valley shape that I wanted, so I had a low section in the middle with these two raised sections on either side. And this one was going to come jutting out further than the one on the other side. I wanted to incorporate a couple of smoother areas with some wedge plates rather than just areas with regular slopes. And I also added in this small medium nougat sort of rock piece here as well. And then to get a good indication of what was going where, I went ahead and mapped out the two areas of raised terrain on either side, just so I knew exactly what I was going to be building up and where. Then I did a little bit of raising up on the left hand side of the MOC and started to work on the terrain on the inside of the center here, but you can see my time lapse cut out and I didn't realize I completely finished this area off camera. Then back to this raised section in the corner. I first added in one layer of support bricks, did a bit of plating off on this level but also raised it up to another level, filling in the outside with dark orange bricks and then plating it off on top, knowing that I'm probably going to add some more details into this section later on. Speaking of finishing off, I also finished off the opposite corner over here, but I had to rip up a little bit of it as I had to change a couple of things to add in the black border. So that border was a little bit more complicated than I thought it would be, because obviously the 1x2x6 bricks that I put down along the sides aren't obviously going to be facing in the right direction to just connect them to the end. So in the end I had to attach the end section to the actual MOC itself using some of the bricks with studs on their sides. And now with the basic terrain finished, it's time to turn our attention over to that far corner and finish off this final section. So I then continued to raise it up another couple of bricks with the medium nougat and dark orange slopes, formulating in this nice plateau at the top, on which I'm going to add one of the cool spires that I'm going to make in just a second. So to make these, I slowly stack up some of the bricks with studs on their sides until they're the perfect height, covering them with these wedge pieces all the way around the outside, ensuring each one of these is in the exact same direction. I then built an inverted version of one of these, as this one's going to sit upside down, and this one uses the wedge pieces that are going in the opposite direction. So now with these made, I could then add them into the MOC. Sadly, these wedge pieces were actually quite hard to find in high quantity, so I only managed to make 2 of these spires in this design. But as you can see, I did make one of the chunkier ones over here that I did then swap over, as I wanted to space out the 2 nicer ones a little bit more. After this, I added a few details to the ground, coming back in with some more raised sections, as if the wind has sort of built up a few areas of sand that are slightly more piled up. This will also provide some nice cover for the troops later on when we add minifigures. I continue to do this across the entire MOC, adding loads more of the tiny little details, mainly to cover up any jumper plates, because I really don't like the way those look when they're exposed. And I think adding in these tiny little details all across the MOC actually look really good and make a huge difference to the final outcome. I even added some details under the ATT that you probably won't be able to see later on. And with that, the final diorama was finished, but of course this is nowhere near actually done. We need to create some sort of awesome battle on the MOC right here. You saw my plans earlier, so you know exactly what I'm going to be adding. There's going to be a huge army of droids and a huge army of clones. So that sounds pretty exciting. Let's get started adding them. Firstly, of course, the ATT has to go in. I tried to position it nicely into the center of this sort of valley right here. And I think as it's sort of pushed into that far corner, it won't take up too much of the MOC. And then, of course, as this is based on the original battle from episode 2, it's going to be a full-on head-on-head battle. The Republic will be, of course, led by a Jedi, and I've selected Mace Windu for this operation. I also gathered together a nice large group of those Phase 1 clone troopers, as well as, of course, a couple of commanders to lead them. And then I've got another Jedi which will bring up another squad in the back, and you might have noticed that this is actually me in Lego form. But we've got to get a little bit more serious, as we're going to be taking on a pretty hefty droid army. So I began with laying out Mace Windu in the front of the battle, with the commander and a load of other clones flanking around him. Hopefully he'll be able to protect them and prevent any more fatalities, because they've already suffered quite a few losses in this battle already. We also armed the ATT with a gunner and a driver, as well as a couple more clones up here at the front, before adding General SW and his little squad pushing from the back. Another Republic were ready to face off against their arch nemesis, the battle droids. To create a sizable droid army, I poured out every single battle droid minifigure that I had, and armed them all with blasters, ready to place them into battle. I know on Geonosis we did see these darker orange battle droid minifigures, but I only have 2 in my collection, so we're going to go with the regular tan ones, as those guys are super expensive. I do have one more of the Geonosian minifigures, but it is this zombie one, so I think I will be stealing the other 2 Geonosians from the other MOC. And I made another custom blaster for this zombie Geonosian with this wine bottle, and added him into the front section here. We often see the battle droids attacking in rigid formations, where they come in waves or lines, so I wanted to recreate that here, adding 2 rows of battle droids at the front, followed by some super battle droids, and then I also put another wave at the front that had almost been pretty much wiped out. I finally posed the flying Geonosian here, and the other Geonosian up on top of this rock. But as of course I'm a massive Clone and Republic fan, I wanted them to win the battle and thought they needed something extra up their sleeves, so I quickly went and grabbed my full Delta Squad minifigures, as we did see them in the Republic Commando video game on Geonosis during this battle. So I armed them up and added them to the back of the MOC right here. And with that, the larger $300 2-day Geonosis build was fully complete. lastly, I'm really happy with the large scale battle we managed to include. I got some nice details in here. Obviously, the larger the mock goes, the harder it is to include details, so I think I managed to pack in a decent amount here. I spent an absolute ton of money on dark orange and medium nougat pieces for this mock, so if you wouldn't mind smashing that subscribe button, I'd really appreciate it. We're going for 100k this year, guys, so I'd really appreciate you coming along for the ride. Let me know which one you prefer of these two mocks right here. I think the small one has some nice details, but the big one's got to be the better one for me. So here I recreated one small and one medium-sized Geonosis mock, but if you want to see what I can do in 3 minutes for Geonosis, check out this video that you're seeing on screen right now, or equally this other LEGO challenge that I did recently. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys over there. Goodbye.